It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Welcome to The New Next, a podcast that addresses current events and how they will impact the future.
From the AP Native American groups to digitize 20,000 archival pages linked to Quaker-run Indian boarding schools. I think this is an amazing project, and I am thrilled for this. Coming from a descendant of Episcopalian Methodist and Quaker ministers, I'm frankly interested in seeing whether or not my family had potential ties to the oppression of these people too. The founder of Yellowstone series, in their 1923, they have, I think, a great storyline around a girl escaping from an Indian boarding school. And I just really do not think people realize that they were literally brutally beating and torturing children all over the world after forcefully, like basically kidnapping these children and forcing them to live at these boarding schools to break the savage out of them. And it's something that will never be able to heal our relationship between indigenous and the settlers. I don't know what to call all these, evangelical settlers, until we address this, because these schools were all about erasing their history and imposing our history on them in reverence of it, beating them. And, it hasn't been that long since Catholic schools, even for the white kids, have decided not to hit the children, to basically put them in line. There's so much generational trauma here. American Indians deserve to have their day. And, there's been so much, I'd say, interbreeding between, like white American settlers, oppressors, whatever you want to call them, and American Indians, that I think some people are like, well, that's old news, but I mean, it's just not. So, the trauma can live in both ways. And I just really, it's going to be a hard road to really address this late 1800s, I'd say in many ways post-Civil War period, where we really worked hard to exterminate the ideas of non-Christian religion. But it's necessary. And I just don't think apologizing for things that have happened long ago without properly giving them their day and acknowledging their existence, acknowledging the people that died and the bodies that they found at these places. It's just, there's a lot of kids that disappeared from their families and then we're killed. It's just some wild stuff. So yeah, it's very interesting. A lot of people, I live in Oklahoma. There's a huge American Indian population here, and there's this theory of, civilized versus uncivilized tribes that has perpetrated itself here. And, the civilized tribes were the ones that played ball with the white people who were from a different ideology, different relation with the land, and had superior firepower, but also had the backing and support of their government to go out and exterminate people. This isn't, there's both sides, right? Like I think on the higher level, a lot of American Indian tribes tried to stick up for their land and perform raids and killed white settlers. People like Tecumseh, that I believe Shawnee warrior, a world famous warrior, was a savage killer in the same way that we were savage killers. A very tactical, smart, military-minded person. We've been in this whole separation mechanism for centuries, based on pigment in our skin or religion. And we'll never be able to get to the place that we need to go, which I believe is more in a cohesive understanding of what the value of life is, and that we need to work with all these people together. But just because you're warring with people doesn't mean that you're able to do stuff like this. And I think, core to my being is when you're attacking children that are unable to defend themselves in the way that an adult person can. This is very, very inappropriate and unforgivable. Whether it be at these Native American schools or the Odd Fellows homes that dealt with orphans, there's a lot of dark histories there. And there's a lot of dark stories. There's a lot of medical testing stories that people just don't really talk about. And it's a very dark time in our Western history, So from the days of Fulk, king of Jerusalem, to now, there's been this kind of historic history of, white oppression, going and taking over places, clearing the pavement, so to speak, reinterpreting local religion, local cultures to benefit them. And, there's a whole hidden history that exists. I ran into that here, knowing about Black Wall Street, how it was burned, from my childhood in Seattle, or like my time growing up in Seattle, learning about that, and then coming here and having nobody know what I'm talking about. And then you're like, am I crazy? This happened. And then that process of looking up on the internet and being like, yeah, this did happen. And I did watch that story, but there was different history taught to these people, and it's two sides to every story. The winner often writes the history, and the only way that we can truly move on in a productive manner is by getting to a point where there's transparency and then we start trusting people again. But, this is core. The American Indians have always communicated through stories and symbols, their culture. You had all these different tribes that spoke in different ways, had different dialects, and these stories live on. They've been passed from generations to generations. They're not going away. If anything, they're getting appropriately brought up again and trying to turn that into some sort of healing event. When you just totally dismiss these realities and say, oh, we've moved on that, let's not make all this thing. I think people need to address this. Otherwise, they're not going to feel included, and they're not going to be members of society in the authentic way that we want them to be in what's turning into a culture driven by millennials and under. It's cool. Our differences are cool. Like, we like it. We actually want to move on a lot of these historical issues and move on from them in a positive way that doesn't discount the history and the hidden history too, and all the mechanisms and institutions that went into subjugating people as oppressed or oppressor, and it's telling people that it's your job to reform these people, or offering bounties for Indian scalps. It's a problem. So, it's complicated stuff here, but when you're running over the world trying to exterminate people because they look different than you, that's, I think, from a core principle sense, that everybody can agree that that is wrong. And this new initiative by the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition, or NABS, is making photos available to scholars and non-specialists by housing digital records on a public database. So I think we're really moving into this point of, let's put the information out there and let's see what happens. I think a lot of people in this non-specialist, the same way that Wikipedia and this kind of, this offer, how this is being delivered offers a really strong opportunity for people from different faiths, different cultures, different beliefs to all promote to a proper account of our history and how we severed ties between children and their family and cultural heritage. It's amazing that a lot of these people are still alive, their lineages, when the whole goal was to exterminate them. And they know that too. So, it's Quakers have always believed in this, I'd say more than any church, the belief of transparency and speaking your truth. I'm not surprised that they're the ones that have answered the call to account for their role in atrocities. And I hope the Catholic Church specifically, who's been pretty much the dominant militaristic church out of everybody over the last 2,000 years. That's part of the reason that they've stayed in power. They also have massive amount of archives, is that they really start releasing more information and giving more people access that aren't Christian or aren't Catholics to the Vatican archives. We really address more on this colonial aspect that has driven our history, our written history over the last couple centuries. You just really understand, or like you really wonder like what sort of beautiful insights on how people lived, how people related to each other must exist in these archives also, because you'd have to think that you had to understand history before you went to destroy it. So by digitizing records, you have the ability to restore access to a hidden history for global communities that were impacted, saw their lineage stamped out. And, in the same way that Ancestry.com and sites like that enable people to reconnect with their history, it's an opportunity to just talk about what is, right? What happened and how do we respond to it in a way that supports our understanding of how we got here. I'm just absolutely thrilled that so Haverford College, it's a Quaker school. They mention Sarah Horowitz here, curator of rare books and manuscripts, who's the head of special collections at the college, Quaker and special collections. She mentions the path that, you have to blend the oral history component with the records from an institution that still exists. So it's really important to blend these histories together and really go deeper into this and help restore some sense of where people came from and what the impact that has on communities, both from a oppressed or what you'd say is perhaps the leaders of these boarding schools oppressor, beating people because they have different beliefs than you. It's an important time for everything to really bring transparency and really talk about what is and how we move forward. I'm very excited for this.